What are some things that you find generally catch students by surprise when they first start their journeys at IIM Ahmedabad?
At Northwestern, my thesis is basically modeling competition, right? How do firms compete?
What is the process like to become a professor at an IIM?
Now that life has given me luck, let me make the most of it.
If you had a magic wand that could change anything in the cat, what would you change?
Both the fish and an elephant need to know how to run fast on land.
What are some things that you think the IIMs do really well when it comes to imparting a world-class business education?
In this generation where attention spans are in seconds, you got to connect it with what they've seen in Instagram yesterday, probably as a video clip. And that's where the ability of the instructor lies.
I'm curious to hear your perspective on now things that IIMs could be better at.
I have my Coursera course on game theory done in a very, very, very non-technical format. I would love it if people check it out. The patient goes through a lot of trauma. So therefore, you cannot tell me that it is a problem of doctors alone. A psychiatrist and a psychologist, psychotherapist has to be involved together in the treatment of an HIV patient. So to me, this is what diversity brings to the table. An American looks at an operations problem and says, follow SOPs. An Indian looks at an operations problem and says, what is the jugaad in this?
Welcome to the Ready, Set, Do podcast, where we discuss journeys of not experts who are just 2 steps ahead of us. I'm Naman Pandey, and in this episode, my guest is Professor Viswanath Pingali. Professor Viswanath specializes in Game Theory and Microeconomics at the most premier business school in India, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. We begin our discussion by going over Professor Viswanath's experiences of getting his PhD from Northwestern University, where he had his first stint as a teacher. From there, we go over his journey to becoming a professor at IIM Ahmedabad, things that catch most students at IIM-A by surprise, things IIMs do really well when it comes to education, and things they could be better at, future of business education in India and across the world, and perhaps most importantly, Professor's incredible research work around healthcare in India. My goal with this episode is that by the end of it, you will have gotten a detailed insight into what it takes to impart education effectively at the best business school in India. This is the Ready, Set, Do podcast, and to support it, please subscribe to the channel and or leave me up to a 5-star rating on Spotify. And now, without any further ado, my dear friends, here's Professor Viswanath. Professor Viswanath, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Likewise, so excited to delve into your experience with teaching that you have inculcated over all these years. I want to begin by what draws you to teaching, what it is that made you realize that this is something you want to, dedicate your entire career towards.
So it's a very, I don't know when it happened, but yeah, I think it goes back to my PhD days where in the US, I had to do a TA-ship in order to earn my stipend, my stipend, right? So therefore, I figured out that as a teaching assistant, I was quite good. So much so that students have also, reached out to me on their own later as well. So therefore, I thought that this might be something that will be a good career for me. But at the same time, I wanted to get into industry to understand how the industry works. So therefore, post my PhD, I joined consulting and I worked there for 2 years. Moved to India, worked for a year. During that time, I happened to do teaching in a business school on a part-time basis. That's when I rediscovered that I am, I think I can hold my fort in a class and I'm quite decent at teaching. So that's how I became a teacher. In 2010, I think I made a full plunge back to academia. And 2012 is when I joined IIM-A. And I think the challenge in the class, the fact that you get to read a lot of stuff, you get to read a lot of esoteric stuff, get to connect dots in the class, and that you get pushed back and then you go and read further to take that critique and then reframe it so that the students understand. These are some of the things that drive me towards teaching. I love the classroom experience. I mean, maybe I'm fortunate to be able to teach at IIM-A, but before IIM-A, I used to teach at IFMR, and I loved that experience too. The idea that I could see some people understand what I want to convey is probably what gets me going in a classroom.
Amazing. And we'll be delving down into those specifics, in just a little bit here, that what it is that, makes finally a point click that you've been trying to convey, and what are some of the better ways around doing that. But just want to take a step back and kind of focus on your experience at Northwestern, where I believe you got your PhD. So I'm based out of Chicago, so it's it's a small world in that way. But do you mind talking through some of your experiences while getting your PhD? What was it that, what was your thesis focused on, and what kind of work you were doing while at Northwestern?
So at Northwestern, my thesis is basically modeling competition, right? How do firms compete?
Hmm.
That's my primary thesis topic.
Is that game theory
It's
adjacent
like
or not
it's
really?
like mostly econometrics and game theory combined together.
I
So
see.
therefore, that's what I specialized in, data and theory. It took me 6 years to finish my PhD, and that's what it is, I think.
Having been in academia across the US and in India, I was trying to see if you could maybe contrast for us what was your experience like in the US.
To be able to give you a contrast of students, I may not be in a position simply because, at Northwestern, I was more a teaching assistant. So therefore, I was more about doubt clearing sessions, grading.
Hmm.
I understood students from a different perspective, whereas at an IIM-A, I'm a full-fledged teacher, right? So therefore,
Yeah,
it's probably not a very good apples to apples comparison.
fair
I
enough.
would argue. There, I was looking at them from, as not my students. They are somebody whose doubts I have to clarify. They are somebody for whom I need to hold tutorials. They are somebody whose papers I need to grade. Here, on the other hand, I'm actually responsible for their learning. So, to that extent, and in US, it's exclusively undergrads that I taught, except a
Right.
brief fling with Kellogg MBA students here and there. In
Hmm.
IIMA, on the other hand, it's only MBA students that I teach. So therefore, to contrast both these guys, I think is not fair in my opinion. So therefore, I'll not
Makes sense.
refrain
That
from that comparison.
Yeah, that totally tracks. So I guess with that, shifting gears a little bit, what is the process like to become a professor at an IIM? And maybe you can talk to your specific experience at IIM Ahmedabad, but I'm sure you might be familiar with other big or other premier IIMs in India.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
do
sure.
how does one become a
Typically,
professor there?
academia market, job market works more or less the same across the world. At IIMA, typically you send your CV, which has a record of your entire employment as well as your, more importantly, publication record.
Okay,
So
interesting.
the institute looks at, for example, I applied in economics. So the institute looks at economics faculty, where is it that the gap is available within the economics faculty, and then looks at whether I can fill a part of that gap or not. And then they end up calling me for giving a talk and faculty interaction. So
Okay.
the purpose of the talk is I present my latest research to them, and then there's a lot of back and forth research seminar, full fledged research seminar. And then after the research seminar, you also meet with every member of the economics group, as well as people who
Hmm.
work in economics, but not necessarily a part of economics group.
I see.
And then a consensus is reached upon on whether this candidate is good, bad, ugly, and then that's how offers are made at the end. So therefore, that's why I said research becomes a cornerstone for every academic's life, pretty much throughout the entire tenure. So that's my journey. In met a few faculty members, I was inspired by work they do, and I sent
Hmm.
my email with my CV to the director. And then one fine day, I heard, "Why don't you come to this place and give a talk?" I
Hmm.
did. It seems they liked what I said, and I liked my interactions, and therefore they made an offer, and I joined.
Appreciate that overview. Kind of want to jump into your experiences at Ahmedabad now for the rest of kind of this section. So, and actually, yeah, before I do that, just for a little bit of context, I my master's was in engineering management from Purdue University. So
Mhm.
what that is basically it's a like dual combo course where half my credits came from engineering school and the other came from business school. So I have very briefly been exposed to stuff like case based learning, and we had some classes that excuse me, MBA and other people used to have to take. And I also have a couple close friends from IIM Ahmedabad with whom I used to interact, and we used to kind of share notes around how our experiences are similar but also very different at the same time. So just trying to give you some context in for for the rest of this discussion where I'm coming from and where my experiences are based out of. So with that in mind, do you mind shining a light on what are some things that you find generally catch students by surprise when they first start their journeys at IIM Ahmedabad?
Yeah, I kind of believe that the academic rigor that this place insists upon rightfully or wrongfully, I don't want to comment on it, but this place is academically very rigorous. And I mean, according to me, rightfully, right?
I'd agree. Yeah.
The amount of academic pressure that the student gets into in the first 1 month of their career at IIM-A, that's something that many students are caught off guard. As you progress further in your time at IIM-A, my assessment, again, having talked to students, is a realization of the depth of activities or breadth of activities that this place offers you. That's the second epiphany that hits many of them, and slowly they fall into their groove in an attempt to make most out of this particular place. So to me, the biggest surprise that many people would have heard कि यार बहुत tough है, it's going to, it's going to, push you to the limits and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But I think unless they experienced it, they would have very limited clue about what exactly this is. Many of us think that IIM-A is about academic excellence. It is. But at the same time, the place offers a lot of stuff. There's so many things that you could specialize in. There are so many trade-offs that you get to make. So therefore, slowly but surely, students start realizing that there is more to life, and that's the second stage of their evolution on the campus. And
I
the
see.
third would be to understand where they want to go work, how they want to go work, what kind of role they're looking forward. In the 2-year MBA program, maybe summer internship. In the 1-year MBA program, career transition. So this is how I think these are the surprise elements at various stages. For some, the surprise would be an ego that gets shattered to pieces. Maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was, or some people are like, I'm surprisingly better than I expected myself to be. But somewhere in the middle is where the reality is, and that discovery to me is probably the biggest journey. You may call it surprise if you want.
No, absolutely. I think that's such a great call out around what you said, that, what it does to you when you're surrounded by a peer group, that you have just no way of expecting what that peer group might be like. So honestly, I can relate to some of what you're saying. Obviously, I never went to an IIM, but um, my experiences at, during my first month at Purdue were very similar. It's just, classic imposter syndrome. At least for me, it was like, how did I even get here? I'm not even half as smart as some of these people, and just what am I gonna do? But again, eventually reality kicks in, and you just,
So,
get
Naman, I
your
think
heads
I'll be
down.
clear with you. You can't gauge luck or anything. I think imposter syndrome is pretty much real in every top place, anywhere in the world. Every day you doubt yourself on what the hell am I doing here in the middle of all these guys. And you somehow survive, right? I mean, so therefore, at some point in time, you'll have to embrace the fact that, now that life has given me luck, let me make the most of it. I mean, that's the spirit that I see IIMA teach most of the people. So therefore, including me, where I come to the realization that, hey, damn it, I'm lucky. Let's not waste away this luck.
Amazing. Do you care to comment on the, you know, broad strokes, the selection criteria that we have for I am basically the cat is what I'm getting at. If you had a magic wand that could change anything in the cat, what would you change?
See, listen, in a country where I am ABC, LIK, the old ones, offer you maybe 3,000 seats and 1.5 lakh people want that, I'm not necessarily sure that you have a very different system. IIMs, almost every one of the ABC, LIK have evolved, and I'd throw ISB into the mix as well, somewhere in the top half itself. They've basically said that we don't necessarily believe that this is the only place where people need to enter. Even experienced folks can enter. So that's how the idea of 1-year MBA started taking shape
Yeah.
in India. And therefore, we are basically saying that CAT may not be the right test for these guys. It's GMAT, right? So therefore,
Yeah.
you have two kinds of selection processes: 1-year MBA and the 2-year MBA. 2-year MBA, frankly, 1.5 lakh people want to do it. 150,000 for
Hmm.
3,000 seats. If you do the calculation, so therefore, I don't know what you do differently. I mean, if I had unlimited resources and time, I would probably interview every one of them to figure out where they fit in, and then
Hmm.
take the ones who have the right kind of a mindset to get into.
Got
If
it.
something can be measurable, right?
And in
So
terms of the way the test is designed itself, so measuring, quantitative ability, verbal and logical reasoning, Is there something you would change in that aspect? I'm just
Maybe not.
curious.
Maybe not. I mean, I think if you look at standard tests like GRE and GMAT, these are the same
Hmm?
tests. These are the same
True.
skills that are
Very
measured.
true.
Therefore, there must be something in these skills that are necessary for evaluating somebody. I mean, even for that matter, even at an undergrad level, SATs and all focus on many of these things as well. So, therefore, there must be something in these skills which, according to me, are necessary. How tough should it be? How easy should it be? Oh, well, that's a question of
Yeah,
debate.
that's a
I'm not
separate
going
for sure.
and I'm not going to
Absolutely.
comment
Yeah.
on that particular part. Again, as I
Yeah.
said, I think one has to keep into whatever answer I give, one has to keep into perspective that the demand for these places is far higher than the supply. So,
Yeah.
therefore, at some
Absolutely.
level, you'll have to say that some guillotines are needed.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, and totally. I wasn't necessarily looking for a comment on how tough it is because again, there's no good way to segregate out, as you said, 1.5 lakh
So,
people.
you know, business aptitude, or can we measure how moldable a person is?
Mm.
These are some of the things that I would like to test, but frankly, no matter how much I thought about it, doing at scale to me is impossible. So therefore, I'd rather do a standardized test, which is same across everybody. Both the fish and an elephant need to know how to run fast online. I don't have a choice in that, it seems.
Yeah, I mean,
And a
you
cheetah
like
too.
that, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, in that race, yeah, just if one can do what it takes to, grow legs as a fish, sure, why not? Might as well attempt to do that.
Yeah, that's
Professor,
how I
what is it?
thought, but
Yeah,
it's still limited. So therefore, yeah, you're not measuring math skill alone, you're not measuring data skill alone, you're not measuring language skill alone. You're not measuring logic alone. You're doing a combination of these. Yeah. So if you're low in one, maybe you make it up in others. That's how I would look at it. Yeah.
makes sense. Professor, what is it that you teach? Like, what's your primary course at IIM Ahmedabad?
I teach this course called, I teach microeconomics, which is the
Okay,
fundamental foundation. And the other course, like in electives, I teach this course called Game Theory.
okay, got it. Uh, Both of those sound like extremely important courses to me. And again, bear in mind, I've never gone to B school, but would you? Would you?
At the cost of, you're asking me a question on my livelihood. So I would like to believe they're extremely important, right? So you you shouldn't be expecting any other answer than that.
That's fair. I was hoping you could. I mean, compared to some other courses, I'm trying to right
No, no, so
size
there
what.
are few in a management education. There are perspective building courses,
Right, exactly.
and
Yeah.
there are skill based courses. Perspective building course would mean understand how the world works around you, what motivates people, economics. Why is budget important? Why is finance ministry important?
Mhm.
How is external affairs ministry important? What is the role of philosophy in a human evolution? What is the role of society in
Wow.
human evolution? These are perspective building courses. These are not some course which you take and say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to the office, I'm going to become a better guy as a result of it. And there are skill courses. How do you manage finances? How do you market a product? How do you build strategy for how do you recruit and nurture talent? How do you understand teams? How do you work in teams? These are skill based courses. You do this, tomorrow your work will change, your working pattern will change.
Yeah.
I actually think that microeconomics is really one of those perspective building courses, not a skill course. And game theory, on the other hand, is a mixture between skill and perspective building, mostly towards perspective building, less towards skill. So
Hmm.
therefore, to me, that's how I think about it. I am one of those big picture teachers, not the
Awesome.
minutia teacher. That's a way. I don't know. Is it better than marketing? Is it better than strategy? Of course, I'm not going to comment on it.
Of course.
I'd like to think it's pretty important. That's where I'll leave it at.
Makes sense. As somebody that's always, been really interested in microeconomics but never got to finally learn it, do you by chance have any recommendations for resources or books that one could pick up to, get fairly dangerous at microeconomics?
So at micro, I don't know. There is a book I kind of refer to my students. It's called as The Undercover Economist.
Gotcha.
I had uploaded most of my class notes, which I think I'm calling as essentials of micro for a manager.
Okay, I
Um,
see.
on my LinkedIn, you should be able to hunt it down.
Oh,
Uh,
awesome. I
quite.
will
I just
definitely do
posted
that.
my entire
Yeah.
class notes, the synopsis of my entire class notes online
That's so
um,
cool.
at one point. So therefore, on LinkedIn. So maybe you should be able to get access to it without.
Absolutely. Can I ask, like, how that came to happen? That's so cool to me that you did that. Is
No,
that
so
common,
the
first of
point
all?
is, I do my course, 15 session course of microeconomics. I divide it into 5 modules of 3 sessions each. After each module, I have a habit of sending email to my students with bullet points of what we covered in the class.
Mhm.
And that poses a lot of questions to them where they that would encourage a discussion among the class over email.
I
And
see.
then I can take it up with the beginning of the next module, and then that's how the classes proceed for me. So therefore,
I
one
see.
fine day the thought came to me, and many of the people have said to me at various levels, "How do I get to learn more about what you do?" And I said, "Okay, here is my notes. Use it the way you see fit. I'm not claiming originality of the content. I'm only claiming
First.
originality of the way they are presented. Be very
Mhm.
honest about it. None of the stuff that I talked about, except for a few things here and there, are my own creation, right? I mean, of course, I talk about my research, and that part would be my creation. Most of it is
Mhm.
something that I'm copying from a textbook, or I'm inspired by a textbook, or
Yeah.
something from the others. I posted it. I just said, if a kid out there downloads it, reads it, and feels that he or she has understood micro a little better, I feel honored. So therefore, that's the intent with which this course has been sent. Last year, one of my students also has, very nicely transcribed my entire game theory class notes, and she gifted me a
Wow.
copy. I made some edits to it, and then I posted it on my LinkedIn as well. The entire 25 session. This is class notes. Previous one was a
Yeah.
summary, but this is actually a class notes. And
Got
that
it.
class notes became an inspiration for me to even launch a Coursera course on game theory that pretty much anybody can do for free. You want a certificate? Yeah, it costs you some minute.
Uh-huh.
Otherwise, it's free. So I teach micro with a lilt of game theory in it, and game theory with a lilt of micro and behavioral economics in it.
Interesting.
So therefore, that's how
Interesting.
it is built. Yeah.
That,
So if you really
yeah,
want to just check my LinkedIn post from
absolutely.
6 months ago, 7 months ago, you should be able to see a lot of resources. And I think the latest post will tell you about my course.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for that overview and how to find, not only find these resources, but the work you've done to accumulate them and make them available to everybody. I think that's, I mean, I didn't know that was a thing that was even possible. So, kudos to you for going ahead and doing that.
Thank you.
Um, Kind of from there, Professor, where I'm getting at next, I think is, in terms of the general, we'll say, quality of education as like a catch-all umbrella term here. What are some things that you think the IIMs do really well when it comes to imparting a world-class, business education? And I'm trying to, on some level, maybe contrast it with anything you saw at Northwestern. But if not, that's totally fine also.
I mean, I think it's a relatively easier question in the sense that IIMs, I think to me, the real value comes in with the fact that they are very connected with the industry outside. At least the top
Interesting.
six. Then I don't know much about the
Yeah,
more recent
that's
IIMs.
totally fine. Yeah, we can focus on the top six. Yeah.
ABC, LIK, they connect with the world of practice. And I'll specifically speak about A because this is the
Hmm.
school that I'm most familiar with.
Of course.
Um, but I am in touch with some colleagues in these places, and I believe things may not be that different. Same is the story with ISB as well. I think the
Mhm.
amount of connect that one has with practice probably makes a huge difference. I mean, I work as a senior fellow in a law firm as well. Not work, rather, I'm associated with a law firm
Yeah.
as a think tank, legal think tank, as a
Mm.
senior fellow. So, therefore, pretty much many debates in the competition policy in Delhi. I mean, I'm clued into it in the conversation. So, therefore, these
I
are the
see.
things that come to the class. So, therefore, what allows these schools, the ability is that you take a textbook, you define a topic, but then the students are not going to be connected with this topic, not in this generation where attention spans are in seconds. You got to connect it with what they've seen in Instagram yesterday, probably as a video clip. And that's where the ability of the instructor lies. And this ability will only come if you're really clued into the happenings around the world. Why is, for instance, all the big tech platforms, why are they in legal trouble? Why is it that they're being discussed online, in the news,
Mhm.
with both positive and negative connotation? That's one. Second one is, of course, the research requirement would mean that you are reading a lot, and your reading
Yeah.
improves your horizons, and improved horizon in a teacher is always good to bring to the class. So therefore, these are the two, three reasons. I mean, and the third one, of course, is, well, an alumni of these schools, at least at A, they're very keen to come to the class and deliver their um, 2 cents on
Interesting.
any topic that I teach.
Yeah.
Right. So therefore, that's another reason why I would say that we are able to get a very good class, a world class education to our students without much problem.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Just a couple call outs on that response. The first being that um, can you help me understand just a little bit in what ways that those connections with the industry are forged? So is it just organizations on campus
So
that
you do
interact
your
with?
research, you publish your research, industry has problems. They see that you are a person who could probably have a perspective on the problems that they actually have. I mean, so for instance, I had published and I'd given talks at various common fora
Hmm.
involving competition. So
Okay.
therefore, if you're a competition lawyer or if you're a firm that's facing a competition issue, you probably would
Okay.
think this is the
I see.
guy who could probably answer it for you. And then they would
Got it.
reach out. And that's how. And then I give a lot of talks to law firms here and there, and they may say, okay, for this problem, maybe this guy is the most appropriate one to write a
Mhm.
report about.
I see.
The
I
government
see.
too, the same way it works. They may have an issue. They may feel that I may be the right person who would
Mhm.
probably be able to say something about it. I work a lot in healthcare.
Got it.
Specifically, I published on tuberculosis. So therefore, if there's a tuberculosis
Wow.
related plan and somebody who's designing the plan happened to read my paper, then maybe a connection is forged, right? I mean, or a doctor
Absolutely.
who is working on TB happens to read my paper. In fact, actually, one of my other papers, which is going into publication shortly, happened because I gave a talk about TB and one of the doctors heard it and reached out to me saying, "Can we do something today?" So that's how it works.
I'm so curious about that. Like, do you also have a hobby in, medicine? Like, I'm sorry,
I
I,
am
I
not
don't know how
I'm not supposed to prescribe any medicines. I'm being very clear about that. It's just that one of my research areas is public health. Um,
interesting.
One
Wow.
of the places where a lot of money is spent on is healthcare. So therefore, economics is everywhere. So that's how I get a
I
lot
see.
into healthcare related research, and that's how
I see.
healthcare becomes one of my passionate areas. And then technology, how technology is constantly evolving and changing. These are the two areas I work on. So therefore, firms in this area are naturally interested in.
Makes sense. Really appreciate that. That I understand now how that connect is continually forged between institutes and companies. The other thing that you said that caught my attention was the very reduced attention spans of students. Can you just tell when you're in a class and you're teaching, and can you just tell who's paying attention versus who isn't?
I would like to believe I do. Normally, I don't allow any electronic gadgets in my
Okay,
class, and I'm
interesting.
very clear about it. And I don't mind adding facetiously. I've gotten very good at throwing chalk. So therefore, if people are sleeping or whatever, they get a shot from me every once in a while as a wake-up call. So therefore,
Hmm.
I've become very good at it. So
I
yeah,
see. Makes
you can
sense.
make out. Most often than not, you can make out. I mean, this is where instructor engagement is very important.
Mhm.
Teaching a class to me is an art. You're not going and delivering some content. You're delivering a performance in which content is the script. But you have to do a lot of ad libbing to your script.
Hmm.
And you need to be able to keep people engaged. Maybe you do cold calling, maybe you ask people to comment on what you're saying. I mean, I don't know. There are several ways in which you can, engage a class to do it.
One of my favorite experiences or one of my favorite classes that I took at the Purdue B School was strategic management, and the whole class was just structured around essentially just case-based learning. So every lecture was a case, you had to read it beforehand, and then the class was really just an interaction. Do you do case-based learning? As it sounds like not, because you said you mostly have your own notes that you've made. Is that right?
Listen, cases to me are some of the props. And they're not necessarily the be all and end all of a class.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm fairly fungible with the cases. Some of them are my cases, some of them are my papers I wrote on real life phenomena, not necessarily structured in the form of a case study, but nevertheless a real life problem that we discussed in the class. So all kinds of stuff are possible. So I can't say I do cases, but at the same time, I won't say I don't do cases. I do a mixture
Makes
of
sense.
cases and
Makes
everything.
sense.
It makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, taking again a few steps back, where we had started around things that you said so well and you put it into words so well, what IIMs do really well. I'm curious to hear your perspective on now things that IIMs could be better at.
So listen, I think the world is changing very fast. I mean, I think the industry is changing at a phenomenally fast rate. While I think we do okay in terms of adapting to the change and our classes continuously are on the move in terms of new stuff that's coming out and all that stuff,
Mhm.
one could always argue that that can be done a little better. You know,
I see.
I think that goes through with every B school in this planet. But nevertheless, according to me, these are some of the things that any B school can do better. Updating your curriculum faster, bringing in the most relevant topics to the class. They happen. I'm not saying that they don't happen. They happen at a fairly large, fairly fast clip, but it can always be faster. I think that's the only thing that I like.
Makes sense. And on your note around how quickly the pace of change has become, at least in the past, few years, what do you think are some changes that, or yeah, what do you envision the future of business and business education to look like in India, maybe in the next 5, 10 years? Do you think there'll be way more IIMs or other institutes that aren't as premier will kind of, become bigger? How do you think that will play down?
We see that there's going to be a lot of technology investment in education. Um, you already are seeing a worldwide trend where the 2 year MBA and the 1 year MBA, both of
Hmm.
1 year MBA gaining traction at a faster clip. Um, right?
Yeah,
2 years
yeah,
remains fairly popular, but 1 year is gaining traction on the other side.
true.
I actually see that there's going to be a lot of learning that happens online. I mean, post COVID, I can absolutely say that our industry interaction has increased manifold. Very simple
Mm.
reason being, oh, now you discovered that there is this mechanism through which we could talk to each other. So, for instance, I don't know who the audience of this particular podcast are, but nevertheless, I'm reaching to a set of people. Hopefully, they'll learn something from listening to me, and this is happening at a faster clip, right? I mean, so therefore, I expect this technology intervention to happen more and more and more in the classroom, and the classroom discussion becoming richer and richer as the days go by. I think I expect that to happen in the coming days. I see short courses, focused courses gaining a lot of traction in the coming days. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
I hope
just
I
to
gave you some answer to your question.
no, you definitely did. Yeah, and I know it's kind of hard when you don't really. I definitely should have done a better job sharing who our audience is, but I'm happy to touch on that a little bit. It's basically students, well, not students, but you could say working professionals between 25 and 35 that are curious, that like to learn new things, new ideas, how the world works in various ways, and there is usually some overlap between the India and the US when it comes to this audience, because most of them are from India but currently in the US,
Now that
might
you
go
give me
back,
the
etc.
opportunity, let me do a bit of marketing for myself with your permission.
Absolutely, please, please,
That
please.
I have my Coursera course on game theory done in a very, very, very non-technical format. It
Hmm.
is probably one of the most highly subscribed electives at IIMA. So therefore, I would love it if people check it out. I mean, if you want a certificate, I think it costs you a little bit, but otherwise,
Of
it's
course, yeah.
absolutely free. I am at a stage in my career where I want to reach more people, and that's precisely the reason why I'm suggesting that they do this course. Sorry for that
Absolutely.
commercial break, if you will.
No,
Over.
no. Honestly, actually, and I was gonna tell you before, but I was going to literally check it out because it's so funny. Yesterday, I was at a friend's house and they had a book on game theory. And again, I've spent 1 hour of lecture worth listening to that. I know what it's like or what it's about, but that's about it. It's very surface level, and I know that it's one of the most important or one of the things you use daily, pretty much. Like the Cold War between US and Soviet Union it boils down to game theory in many ways. So I'm extremely intrigued by that. So I don't know about others, but I would 100% be checking that out. And I'm
So,
really, really curious to see how
good.
that goes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then, kind of on our last segment here, a little bit, and we'll be going into, really subjective things, but these are just things I've always wondered and never really had somebody to ask. So I'm just going to take the time here. Um, I guess, what is your general thought around people that say that you don't need, an MBA education to start a successful business? There's many examples of people that have done it without any formal education. What do you say to those people that think that?
No, they are right. I mean, absolutely. Okay, but there's a nuance to it. Listen, I think most of the stuff that you could learn online, there are courses, etc., etc. So therefore, why do you actually join a B school? That becomes an important question. You can avoid mistakes that other people have learned the hard way. I think to me, that's what a business education is all about. And there are, of course, some skills. Leveraging, for instance, understanding what financial metrics to look at for a company. These are hard skills that you'd learn. Data analytics, these are skills that you could learn. You could learn on YouTube as well. I mean, instead of curating for yourself 50, 60, 70 courses on YouTube, you're saying that this is my 2-year period that I actually invest. Second thing is that NBA should lead to what I call a self-reflection phase. If you're working and you're continuously involved in working and you're doing a video here and a video there, how much of that reflection is even possible?
True.
That
Very
becomes
true.
the question. Having a dedicated time for yourself and saying, yeah, I've done my classes, I've learned the following. How does it apply to me going forward? What fascinates me in life? What is it that I want to do going forward? I mean, these are the questions that you want to spend time thinking about. This is another value that I see that an MBA brings to the table for you, which a curation of courses may not necessarily bring to the table. A final place where I think MBA kind of comes together for you is the peer group. You're talking about people who are constantly thinking about the same things that you're thinking over and over again from multiple perspectives. Naman, I don't know, but one of the biggest USPs of any management school has to be the diversity in the class. And you may ask what the
Completely
diversity
agree.
table.
Absolutely.
Oh my God. I mean, I think the way an economist looks at the world and the way a doctor looks at the world and the way a CA looks at the world and the way a mom looks at the world are very, very, very different. A mom CA may look at the world very differently from a mom engineer. I'll be very clear about that as well. So therefore, or a dad, arts graduate will look at the world very differently from a mom engineer. There's a lot of diversity that comes to the table. For instance, I mean, I am working, as I said, on TB. TB is a health problem. I've actually had arguments about, the treatment patterns, how to make them better. While I will not tell you this is the drug you need to take, or etc., etc. Can I think of better delivery mechanisms? Can I actually think of better incentive mechanisms? Can we actually justify the additional cost that one pays for curing TB? My perspective comes from cost. A doctor, what is a breakthrough that I can have to cure you better? A sociologist is more worried about TB from the point of view of, hey, it's a social disease, it spreads like crazy. So how do I actually think about social ramifications? If a person has TB, specifically in India, this family is, boycotted by the surroundings. I mean, there are social ramifications for that. That's how the sociologist will look at it. If you look at HIV, for instance, the biggest problem is psychological. Forget about the disease and its prognosis and everything else. It's actually psychological. The patient goes through a lot of trauma. So therefore, you cannot tell me that it is a problem of doctors alone. A psychiatrist and a psychologist, psychotherapist has to be involved together in the treatment of an HIV patient. So to me, this is what diversity brings to the table. And this is exactly what a B school should train you on, in embracing the diversity of thought and sharpening your decisions. You cannot have a uniform 45-year-old pontificating on how the world needs to work. In fact, actually 45-year-old should not be pontificating on how the world needs to work. I mean, a 60-year-old should definitely not be. The world is probably screwed up for so many generations already. So therefore, let's be very, very clear. So to me, these are the important elements of an MBA education, to sit on a case study with a bunch of classmates who have very different views of the world from you. So, for instance, an American looks at an operations problem and says, follow SOPs. An Indian looks at an operations problem and says, what is a jugaad in this? I hope your audience understand the word jugaad.
Oh, 100, of course.
Translation would be street smartness, right?
Yeah.
Jugaad in this. That's what I tend to ask as an Indian. Correct. So therefore, and even within India, a Tamilan may think very differently from a Telugu, may think very differently from a Gujarati, right? And which is very different from what a Bengali thinks. So therefore, this diversity of thought process is what I think an MBA brings to the table. So therefore, is it strictly necessary from a skill standpoint to do an MBA? Probably not. But as a holistic package, probably it's useful. Again, let me be very clear. I make my living teaching MBA, so therefore I'm bound to tell you that MBA is useful. You don't necessarily have to take me at my face value. And
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that your entire what you just laid out about the usage of diversity and how you kind of blended it together with the work that you're doing in public health was so well articulated. Th- like thank you so much for painting such a vivid picture across various sections. Stuff you said about how it affects societies at scale and the various ways it affects them. Like it makes so much sense to me. I always thought, and you always read that yeah, diversity is important, it's our strength, but I actually don't think until just now I've fully deeply realized why it is that it's so much sought after and the immense uses that it has. So really
no, no, no.
appreciate that. I thought that was really, really well done. And I'm just
For a
also
long
Mhm.
time, let me be clear, maternity policy for women were being designed by some middle-aged men sitting in some corners of the capital city of the government, right? So therefore, you know why diversity is needed. Uh, enough
No, totally. That's such a mic drop moment.
said.
um and I guess sorry, I know I keep saying last and keep going on, but you're just such a treasure trove of information. I promise this is my actual
I
last
have 10
question.
minutes for you. That's all because I have a meeting in.
Absolutely, yep. I will make sure to, end within that. As somebody that's, while still fairly young, but very passionate about healthcare also, like I feel like I really want to make a difference in whichever way I can, specifically in India. And for context, I'll be moving back next year for good, like permanently.
Very good.
Um, yeah. What are
As
some
somebody who
things?
made that switch almost 14 years ago now, 15 years ago now, 2009, I believe I came back. So it's 15 years. This December, it will be 15 years.
Uh-huh.
I have a strong feeling you may not regret it. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, I needed to hear that because I think about that almost every other day,
So
what
maybe
it
I'll
would
give
be
you
like.
a slightly different thing to chew on, and we'll,
Yeah.
in the sense that this has been my philosophy that I think I advocated to several of my friends, relatives, cousins, siblings, everybody. If you're a Nobel material, yeah, don't come back here. Be honest. I think at that elite rarefied world, maybe India is not yet up there. Maybe it is in some circles, I don't know, but in social sciences and all that stuff, probably it is not. And I think your chances of getting that Nobel eventually increase in the Western world than in India. Again, if you're at maybe, making your ends meet a little more than that, don't come back. Again, conditions may not be great for you. If you're anywhere
Yeah.
above this and below this, below that rarefied world, I think India is definitely a good place for you to
Mm,
be. You might have doubts, but in the long run, it still
yeah,
is a good one. And this is a market to hedge on right now. There's no doubt.
for sure. And just to quickly clarify on the Nobel thing, you mean just in terms of
No, I
research?
didn't mean academia. I also meant if you are going to be the
Gotcha.
next Bill Gates, if you're going to be the next Elon Musk, um, I think the chances that you're going to blow up simply because of network effect, in the sense that you're in the middle of a community that does this stuff.
Hmm.
It adds a lot. You're not an individual genius. It's a society that took advantage of your individual genius and made it
Mm, I
pronounced.
see. I see.
You had an idea that I want to do an electric car, but you needed a designer who put a shape to it. You needed a technologist you had an engineer who actually
Yeah.
made it a reality. You had a brilliant marketeer who made sure that it works out. So therefore, this combination is probably not yet there in India. It is getting there. I'm not
Mm,
joking about it. It's getting so that's what I mean when I said Nobel material. You're in that
makes sense.
rarefied, environment in every sense of the word. In the in the you're the cutting edge of technology, not just
Right,
user
right,
of the
right.
cutting
I
edge of
see.
technology. Now, if you look
That's
at
helpful.
cutting edge technology, many Indian firms are also using cutting edge technology. Many of them were
True.
using
Yeah.
ChatGPTs in their business model, but the creator of ChatGPT, that's a different ball game altogether.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you're
No, that totally tracks.
level that you're talking about, maybe not. I mean, I have
Hmm.
my doubts yet. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
I think that tracks with what I had in mind. How many years do you think before India has a version of Elon Musk?
that's a very difficult question to answer. Maybe tomorrow, for all that you care, and
Yeah.
maybe 20 years later also. We are still
Fair.
answering the same thing. I don't know. I mean, that's an impossible question to answer without a crystal ball. Even with that, I doubt.
Fair enough.
I mean, I see the pieces moving in right direction, and I see the pieces moving in right direction on multiple dimensions. So therefore, the thing about technology is that it is never a gradual shift. It is just a tectonic shift overnight.
Yeah.
So one can't even predict these things. So therefore, I'll leave it at that. I'll not answer that question if you're okay with it.
Totally. Professor, it's been such an absolute delight to, learn from your experiences and all the amazing wealth of information that you've shared here today. I feel like I could genuinely go on for hours, but I know we have a end and
No, unfortunately, I have another talk.
no, yeah, absolutely. I just genuinely want to thank you for taking the time today for our listeners. And I'll be linking your course in the link in description to this video and on Spotify. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Appreciate it. Bye.
That brings us to the end of episode 24 of the Ready Set Do podcast. I would like to thank all of you for sharing these conversations with those that continue to benefit from them. If you would like to support me, the easiest way to do that is by subscribing to my YouTube channel and or leaving me up to a 5-star rating on Spotify. My comment section on YouTube is the place I go to for feedback as well as guest nominations. Please feel free to always leave a comment because that really just makes my day and makes this all worth it, especially on days like this where it gets hard to try and do my best. Catch you all in the next one. New episodes every Wednesday.